I'm going to change gears. My name's Eriel Deranger, and before I start, I'm going to read a spoken word to try and bring us into a conversation about reconciliation. 150 years of being told how to act, how to use our lands, how to govern, how to learn, how to raise our children, how to build our communities, how to live, how to assimilate. My assimilation is broken because I still have an eagle feather and a smudge bowl. My assimilation is broken because I still know where I come from. My assimilation is broken because I know who my ancestors are: the land, the water, the air, this earth. My assimilation is broken because my knowledge was granted to me from institutions that were left out of your books. My assimilation is broken because my children have always known who they are. My assimilation is broken because I still hear the sounds that call me home. I can still see the northern lights guiding me to where I'm supposed to be. My assimilation is broken because I am still here, standing as a proud Indigenous woman. 150 years, and we still feel our ancestors in our blood, calling us to be proud, calling us to be strong, calling us to break down the walls of policy that caged us in reservations, caged us in poverty, caged us in sickness, caged us in colonization. We are not broken. We will never be broken. We will decolonize and we will organize. We'll become stronger and louder, and we will help each and every one of our brothers and sisters over the walls of oppression. We will stand up and return to our lands and territories. We will sing our songs and speak our language. We will return to the sacredness of our peoples. 150 years, and we are breaking the systems that tried to break us. So, my name is Eriel Deranger. It means Thunder Woman in my language, Dene Sotlene. And I'm from the Treaty 8 territory in northern Alberta, the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. And I'm joined today with two powerful women that I want to offer the opportunity to introduce themselves in their own languages and really pay respect to them. But we have Beverly Jacobs and Jessica Buldoc. I'd like you to both introduce yourselves.
Scano Soquego, Giaso Gawenki se, Gayangahaga, Nyagawai Shoutda, Hodena Shoni. And what I said in the Cayuga language, which is one of the 6 nations, is I told you my nation, which is a Mohawk nation. I come from the Bear Clan, and my real name, my Mohawk Bear Clan name is Gawenkyuse, and it means she's visiting. So I am proud to, actually this is our traditional territory where we are sitting. I am still a visitor, and welcome you to our traditional territory, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel tonight.
Thank you.
Miigwech Bev. Ani bojo kinawea, bidoyaba matsi benes Indigenous, bawatin nedonjaba, makwayan dodem, Ojibwe Anishinaabe kwayandao. Greetings, I'm really grateful to be back here. My English name is Jess. My Anishinaabe Moan name is the little thunderbird that brings good life. I'm excited to be here with some relatives of mine. I'm also Bear Clan from Anishinaabe, and my home is Bawatin. Or Sault Ste. Marie. I'm a member of the Batchewana First Nation. We are a nation of Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people.
Thank you so much. You know, yeah, give her a round. It's been a really interesting day and a lot of talk of reconciliation. I've sat on numerous panels, taken in a couple other ones as well. And what's really powerful about this panel in particular is having Indigenous women. Because when we talk about reconciliation, we often just think of a reconciliation of the wrongdoings that have happened in the past, but I also think we need to be talking about the power of women and this rise of the matriarchy and the women that's a part of this process of reconciliation, at least for me. So I just want to give a round of applause for these powerful women. So we're going to discuss reconciliation. And the first question I have for you, we watched this video just before this this presentation before us, and it really talked about where we are with truth and reconciliation. So I would like to hear from you how you define reconciliation.
I've had a very difficult time with the concept of reconciliation as a Mohawk woman, as a Haudenosaunee, Six Nations woman, because I come from, and we come from, these lands and territories that have been stolen from us. And as Indigenous women, we are connected to our mother, the earth, in very spiritual ways. And so what I was taught was that reconciliation was having healthy relationships. And one of those, I want to share this teaching with everyone. This is what's called the Goswenta. It was a wampum treaty that was made between my peoples, the Haudenosaunee peoples, and the early colonizers. So with the Dutch, with the French, with the British, and then later with the United States. And that the purpose of this was to establish healthy relationships. And so what the purple lines represent, so Goswenta actually means, literally translated into river of life. And that we had a relationship along this river of life. And the purple, one of the purple lines represents the colonizer's ship. And it holds their laws, their customs, their beliefs, their ways of being, everything that holds who they are and what they believe in. And on the other side represents our canoe. And in that holds our laws, our language, our culture, our ceremonies, our beliefs, everything that holds us in who we are, our way of being. And that we were to travel along this river of life. And there's three basic principles of this healthy relationship: peace, trust, and friendship. And that's very basic principles of a healthy relationship, right? So we were supposed to live along this river of life with these principles, very basic principles. But colonial law, in Canada, I'm a lawyer, I've been trained in law, and learned how law has been used as a tool of assimilation and colonization. And the doctrine of discovery is one of the basic understandings of the relationship and how their law was established in this country and in North America. And it's still law. It's still, according to Eurocentric law, the doctrine of discovery is the root of the taking of our lands. And when we as Indigenous women and people are directly related to our lands and territories, you've erased a whole generations of our belief systems and our relationship to the land. So when we talk about reconciliation, we have to talk about the truth. And when we talk about the truth, this is the history. This is the true history of North America, and specifically with Britain and with the United States. And so part of that understanding is returning back to this original relationship and having healthy relations of peace, trust, and friendship. It's actually very simple.
Thank you so much. And how about you, Jessica?
I appreciate this question because the word reconciliation is something that everybody wants to define as being one thing. And it's important to recognize that the word and the process of reconciliation means something different. And that we have a lot to draw from in our teachings. And so I want to thank you, Bev, for bringing the wampum and sharing a little bit of that from your perspective. For me, I think there's things that really stand out from that story that connect to the work that I do, which is with young people working cross-culturally to understand the story of colonization here, but also the richness of Indigenous history that was here before colonization happened. And in the video, we learned a little bit about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was here in Canada. And the basis of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was the work and the stories of survivors of Indian residential schools. And through that process, they started to begin to talk about reconciliation as the process of restoring and maintaining healthy relationships. And I think Bev really spoke to that in a deeper way in the teachings from the wampum. And so when I think about reconciliation and in the work that we do with young people, we think about those aspects of restoring relationship. And sometimes when we talk about reconciliation in Canada, we talk about an Indigenous and non-Indigenous relationship, but it's also important to take that back to think about what colonization destroyed the relationships in our own communities, our relationship to our lands, our relationship to our communities, our culture and our languages, our relationship with our spirit and our spirituality. And so when I think about reconciliation, I think about we need to restore those relationships too as we start to build new relationships with all of the people who've come to call Turtle Island and this area home.
Thank you so much. You know, there's lots of different definitions of reconciliation, and I think that's because there's such a wide diversity of Indigenous peoples across Canada. We are not pan-Indigenous. We're not just one homogenous people, and I think that really needs to be clear. I'm a Dene woman, and we have, you know, Haudenosaunee, and then we have Anishinaabe. We have different people from different regions, and we all have our own understandings and relationships. With the Crown, with each other, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's really important to understand that. And so moving forward, why has reconciliation become so important to moving towards a more just and sustainable future?
Well, I think it's really important to, as Indigenous people, and I think as Chris had introduced, our relationship to the land, and that as Indigenous peoples, we've always been protectors of the land, protectors of Mother Earth, and that has always been our responsibility, and that's part of us as Indigenous people and our laws as Indigenous people is that we have that responsibility, and we have never stopped taking care of that responsibility. And especially as Indigenous women, we're always on the front lines and the ones who are willing to stand on the ground and be there and to protect our lands and territories. So, and that's never ended. Mm-hmm. And our ancestors, our elders, our language holders, our knowledge holders, despite the colonial processes of genocide, it's never happened because we still have our language speakers, we still have our knowledge holders, and those teachings that continue onto our seven generations, that we have that responsibility, and we've never given that up. But when we have those relationships with those who don't understand that relationship, when it's all about economy, when it's about jobs, when it's about development, when it's about having no idea of what that relationship to the land means. And so we continue to fight, we continue to protect our lands and territories, and we have to, and part of that process is also educating the public. And that's always going to be part of what my responsibility is to educate and to continue to educate, because the education systems of colonial peoples aren't telling the truth. And so we need to ensure that that truth is being told.
Truth is a big part of why we have reconciliation in the first place. And if I think about the futures that we want to create, they're usually built within a context. Sometimes that's a historical context, the context of the people who create and envision those futures. And so it's really important for us to be able to understand the context from a Canadian perspective of that history, and to think back about the stories and the information that was missing as we were building this country, or as Canada, the colonizers were building this country, and then what that set in motion for who Canada is today. And so context is so important if we're going to be building a different future. We need to be able to see the story from all different angles in order to create something different, to not recreate the patterns that seem to be happening all over the world over years and generations and generations. They look different. The leaders that are leading some of the most evil in this world may have a different platform. Maybe it's Twitter, but it's the recreation of these patterns, because we're not taking time to be able to understand the truth in the context of the world that we're living in. And so to me, reconciliation gives us the opportunity to be able to heal that history and that story, and to create a context for us that is something that is a powerful place to build from.
Thank you. You know, I want to draw on some of the remarks that Chris made as well. You know, he talked a lot about reconciling our relationship with the land. And we often think of the truth and reconciliation process in Canada as reconciling our relationship with the colonizers. Where is that reconciliation with our relationship with the land? Like, why is it so important, not just for us as Indigenous peoples to have, you know, access to healthy lands and ecosystems and our lands and territory, but where is reconciliation and connection to land in respect to all people of Turtle Island?
That's the answer in my PhD dissertation, by the way.
I guess we should all read her PhD dissertation.
So the answer, part of this process that we're in today's society is trying to understand what's happening to us within our nationhood, trying to understand our relationship to the world, and so it part of that is, and what Jess had said, is about healing. And we as Indigenous people are leading the way with healing. And the colonizers, the settlers, you know, one of the things I'm saying is, well, how are you reconciling your own colonization? We know what we're doing. We know what we need to do, because we have our language, like I said, and we have those ceremonies that are going to help us heal. But we know that these are traditional lands, Indigenous territories. So how do the settlers acknowledge their own healing? How do they acknowledge their own relationship to Indigenous lands and territories? How do they acknowledge their own healing from where their original lands and territories come from and where they come from? So part of that reconciliation and connection to the land, because here in Canada and North America, there's such thing as a land claims process, where Indigenous lands are still being stolen, but there's no reconciling that the land claims and the original relationship of Indigenous people to the lands. So there's a continuous struggle and a continuous fight, and until there's an understanding of that First Nations relationship is part of the key to healing and understanding that relationship and connection to the land and water.
Eriel was actually in my territory like 2 days ago, teaching us about climate justice from an Indigenous perspective. And so this question gets me thinking about what Chris said when he was talking about 2% of land is stewarded by Indigenous people. In Canada, at one time, there was hundreds of nations that were that had a relationship to, 100% of the lands that is now known as Canada, and now we're down to about 0.02%. And that's as a result of assimilation policies, forced relocations and genocidal policies of Canada. But the statistic that was really important that Eriel was sharing with us, I think, and you might need to correct me on it, is that globally, Indigenous people are stewarding a significant amount of the biodiversity of the entire world, and that's important.
80%.
80%, sorry, 80%. 30% is not enough. Yes, 80%. And why that is important is because we're actually seeing what is going to become one of our biggest challenges in the future, and it's happening right now, and that's in relationship to our water, in relationship to climate change, and the impacts that we're seeing in the weather and how that's impacting our humanity. And so when I think about reconciliation and that reconciling of a relationship to land, those original instructions that were gifted to us by creation as Indigenous people are also part of what I think will be needed and necessary in order for us to get through this next phase of destruction that we're about to face. And so it's like we need those knowledges, and we need that Indigenous sciences to be respected and acknowledged and upheld in creating solutions for the future around possible climate destruction and devastation, which is happening right now.
Thank you. You know, I think that's a really great segue into the next question, is that, truth and reconciliation in Canada isn't just about telling about the wrongdoings that happened, but it's also about moving forward to reconciling not just our relationships with the colonized and the colonizers, but also our relationship with each other and the land. And there's really great opportunities, but there's also really big challenges. So could you maybe name some really big challenges that exist in the current reconciliation process, but also counter it with some really key opportunities that we should take in this moment?
How long do we have?
We have 8 minutes.
Well, you had seen some of the story in the video with missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That's probably the worst of the worst situation, with the highest numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and it's on a daily basis. And that is also in direct relationship to the violence of Mother Earth. And so until there's a shift in the way that women are thought of and respected, then that is when things are going to shift. When we're respecting Mother Earth, we're respecting the women in our nations. And it's really important that we respect that, because women bring babies, and they bring and are respected in bringing our nationhood. And so part of that is understanding the relationship that we have with our mothers and our grandmothers and our matriarchs, and the relationship to land. And we've had prophecies. We've had those prophecies that tell us what's coming. And part of that understanding is making sure that that doesn't happen as human beings. And that's one of our teachings, is saying that as a human beings, we're part of all of creation. And if we are part of all of creation, we have that responsibility to take care of her and everything around her, every spiritual living thing. And so part of understanding that relationship as human beings is being responsible, that we're all responsible, that we all have to take care of her, and that we have to ensure that we teach our future generations. And we always have, as Haudenosaunee, as Ungwahoi people, we have been trying to maintain that and ensuring that our future generations are very well aware of their responsibilities. So that's what I say, is that we're all responsible. We all have to be taking care and taking action and ensuring our Mother Earth, everything that's on her, is taken care of.
In the video that you all saw, there was 2 young people that were mentioned in that video. One was Tina Fontaine, and one was Colton Boushie. And I think that their stories speak leagues into where we're at in this country in terms of transformative justice for the violence against Indigenous people. And so when reconciliation first began, it did signal a change, that something was going to be different. And I think that Indigenous people were warmed inside and to a certain extent because that there was an acknowledgement of some of the violence that had been perpetrated against us. But over time, we're already seeing the ways in which that this word and the process of reconciliation is being co-opted into something that can be commodified, that only is required of you from 9 to 5. If you have a job that in the description it says work with Indigenous people, that isn't something that you need to do if you don't have funding for it, is only for Indigenous people. The ways in which that we can find loopholes to get out of the process of reconciliation. And I believe that part of this is because we live in a capitalist society, and so we do want to find ways to make reconciliation sexy, to only see reconciliation as something that is possible if there's money behind it. And so I want to name that reconciliation is an industry in Canada, and that is something to be mindful as we want to participate in something that's going to take 150 years. We have to be able to think outside of the cycles of political parties, the cycles of funding that's available to us, and really to think about the ways in which that we need to transform ourselves. And as Bev said, reconciliation is a healing process for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And to think about what's possible when we do that hard work to heal ourselves, and to understand our stories in relationship to where we come from and the original peoples of the land, no matter where we are living on Mother Earth.
Thank you. So we're down to our last 2 minutes and 40 seconds. No pressure.
You forgot positive things.
No, you talked about how it warmed our spirits. I think, truth and reconciliation in theory has been a really, really good process. We needed to bring these things to light. We just need to be going further than we're going. I think the last question, and you're going to have to make it 1 minute each. If you could tell, we have a lot of people that have come to this parliament that are from all over the world. And a lot of folks haven't known about the history of Canada and the atrocities, and they're learning this for the first time. So is there anything that you would like some of the international guests that are here to take home with them? Something that they can learn from what's going on with the truth and reconciliation process, either good or bad? What's one thing you would like them to take home?
Well, for me, I think one of the biggest messages is that despite all of the atrocities and the genocidal processes and law being used as a tool, is that our people are very resilient, and that as Indigenous people, we have been able to survive genocidal policies and processes that tried to erase us as a people. And I really believe that the resiliency has come from our really strong leadership and strong women, strong knowledge holders who have been able to maintain our traditions despite it all. And that we need to continue to learn from them. I'm learning on a daily basis myself, and continue to learn from them, from the knowledge holders, from our traditional language holders, because the key is in our languages as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that because one of the young women that I had the pleasure of working with used to say, the history and the things that happen to us is not what defines us. And so the takeaways that are important for anyone is to see the richness in what's missing from the conversation because Indigenous people are not at the table. And that there are people who are being excluded from processes of creating the future that we, I think, imagine and know is possible, but can't really quite figure out how to get there. Those answers, I think, rely on people like Indigenous folks in places like Turtle Island, stepping into our gifts and our power and our beauty as distinct peoples, and the connection to the land is an important piece of that, as I've said a whole bunch in this panel. But yeah, I wish I had something like super like sharp and like last moment pin drop kind of thing, but I don't. But I thank you for listening and learning more. Truth is important, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission itself only speaks to Indian residential schools, and there is a lot more history about the lands here and the history of Canada that isn't told. And so be radical explorers of truth, I guess is a thought that I'll leave you with.
That was quick and sharp. I don't know, that was pretty good, actually.
Twitter.
I want to thank both Beverly and Jessica for joining us today and really imparting knowledge. And I think it's really important that we talk about these subjects in real, honest, and truthful ways. So I want to thank you for bringing truth to power and power to truth and sharing your wisdom with all of us today. Thank you, and Masicho. Hi, hi.
Thanks, Eric.